A united EU front in the face of rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine. That was the central topic of discussion for EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels. Well, the EU has reiterated its full support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's continuing military build-up along its eastern borders. Moscow has repeatedly denied its plans to invade Ukraine. But the EU's foreign affairs chief says that the troop movement and what he called Russian rhetoric bring back dark memories.
The Russian military build-up in and around Ukraine and Russia's attempts to recreate dividing lines on our continent undermine the core foundations and principles on which European security is built and bring back dark memories of spheres of influence which don't belong to the 21st century. We reaffirm our full and unquestionable support to Ukraine and that any military aggression against Ukraine will have serious consequences and massive costs for the perpetrator.
Well, members from the NATO Defence Alliance are boosting their presence across the region amid the heightened tensions. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg gave details of the deployments earlier.
For instance, Denmark is sending a frigate to the Baltic Sea and will deploy more jets to Lithuania as part of our Baltic air policing mission. France has expressed its readiness to send troops to Romania under NATO command. The Netherlands is sending fighter aircraft to Bulgaria for air policing and is putting units on standby for a NATO response force. Spain is sending ships to join NATO naval forces in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean and considering sending jets to Bulgaria. And the United States, for the first time in decades, put a carrier strike group under NATO command. We are considering to further enhance our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. This could include the deployment of additional NATO battle groups. These deployments are proportionate and in line with our international commitments.
Well, the EU has proposed offering more support to Ukraine. The Commission President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled a number of new funding measures.
The Commission proposes a new emergency macrofinancial assistance package of 1.2 billion euros. This package will help Ukraine now to address its financing needs due to the conflict. We count on the Council and the European Parliament to adopt this emergency macrofinancial assistance as soon as possible.
Well, Russia has reacted, saying that the US and NATO are escalating tensions and driving hysteria. A spokesman for President Putin says that the deployment of forces and military hardware, as well as the spreading of misinformation, is ratcheting up the temperature. He said Ukraine is building up a huge number of troops in the east of the country, saying it was the one preparing for an offensive operation. And our Russia analyst Galina Polinskaya says that while Moscow's troop numbers on the border have not risen, training exercises with Belarus are due next month.
Actually, it is very hard to predict the Kremlin's next move right now. It insists that it is waiting for the written response from the United States, and we have heard those harsh statements from Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who accused NATO and the US of escalating tensions around Ukraine by moving its forces to its east flank. And Mr. Peskov also said, I quote, that those movements of NATO near Russian borders cannot be ignored by the military. But what would be the next move? It is hard to say at this particular stage. What we know is that Russian forces are staying at the Ukrainian border. We know that the next biggest stage of Russia-Belarus drills will start very soon in February. And we also know that in February, the Russian State's Duma Council will decide on the proposal to recognize the self-proclaimed republics on the east of Ukraine. This was the idea of the Communist Party. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says that the tensions are escalating and that it is not Russia to blame for that.
Well, let's get the perspective now of Kurt Volker. He is the former US ambassador to NATO and special representative to Ukraine in negotiations from 2017 to 2019. He joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us. To begin with, significant developments with tonight, the first time in decades that the US has deployed a carrier and strike force under NATO control. Jens Stoltenberg saying that this is proportionate. What does this then tell us about the concrete and imminent risk of a Russian invasion?
Well, I think this is important to reassure allies in the East that they are not vulnerable. So NATO's first mission is collective defense under Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. And by committing forces, as many countries are doing now, including the United States, it is meant to send a signal to all NATO allies that they can be assured of their security and a warning to Russia not to attack NATO. The reason to do this, however, is exactly as you say. It is Russia's massive military presence that it has put in and around Ukraine, extending that also now even into Belarus and also into the Black Sea. So the risks of a Russian invasion are actually quite real.
You talk about it being a symbol of reassurance then to those eastern states that they're not alone. But if Russia does invade, will NATO send troops onto the ground to defend Ukraine militarily?
Yeah, both President Biden and NATO as an alliance have made clear that it is not their intention to put NATO ground forces into Ukraine to fight Russia. They are, however, providing security assistance and equipment and trainers to the Ukrainians so that the Ukrainians can better defend themselves. And I think those efforts have escalated in the last week or so as well, including with equipment being transferred from the Baltic states, from Poland, from the Czech Republic, from the UK to Ukraine, as well as from the United States to Ukraine, in order to help improve the armaments of the Ukrainian military in the event Russia does invade.
Well, talking about efforts then on both sides, Russia observers will be quick to point out, they will say that Putin courts chaos, that this is part of his brinkmanship. We've already seen complicated discussions between EU member states over their response. Has there already been some seeds of chaos which have been sown by Putin?
Well, this has been all manufactured by Putin from the beginning. He's the one who put these massive military forces in and around Ukraine. Remember, he's already taken pieces of Ukraine, Crimea, and parts of eastern Donbass in 2014 and 2015. He has placed extraordinary demands upon the United States and NATO, essentially to recognize that Russia has a sphere of influence, including Ukraine, and to roll back, commit to no further NATO enlargement and roll back NATO military deployments to allied territories. It is as if the countries and the people in Central and Eastern Europe don't exist. It is Russia making demands about itself over the heads of all of those people who live in these countries and seek to be secure and seek to live in freedom.
Pastor's prologue then, Ambassador, if I may, from your experience, what is likely to happen next and what should NATO do about it?
Well, I think NATO has been clear that it is prepared to defend allies, but it leaves Ukraine in a kind of a gray zone. And I think Putin will take advantage of that gray zone as he did before, as he did in 2014 by seizing Crimea. So I think we're likely to see a very aggressive and swift move by Russia in the coming weeks to take parts of Ukrainian territory and then to stop again and then draw a new ceasefire line inside Ukraine.
All right. Kurt Volker, former US ambassador to NATO, thanks so much for being with us and for your valuable insights.